And we're back. Hey guys, back to read another few chapters of this book. I thought that we were like really close to ending this. Like I don't want to say it's like almost done. I want to say over half. And I think we are over half right now in the book. But I think it's actually a lot longer than I thought it was. I think we are almost half now, maybe at halfway. But real quick, we're gonna read like the next few chapters, probably two again, like 20 to 30 minutes, give or take, and then go from there. I'll probably do another stream reading this either before or after gaming, which is what happened last time. Which, speaking of that, I've noticed not a lot of people of y'all watch that video, so I'm hoping that means y'all tune in for the stream or listen to it. But would like if you go back and watch that video, just a reminder, remind yourselves and give that video a like and some watch time for me. I would appreciate that. Also, of course, just to read the book. I think the book's really good. If that wasn't obvious. It looks really good. Anyways, to get into it, let me play some music for us. I like this one. Play that, and then where is my book? Here we go. This is in the third book, I believe, right here. But chapter 2 of that, the cardinal virtues. The previous section was originally composed to be given as a short talk on the air. If you are allowed to talk for only 10 minutes, pretty well everything else has to be sacrificed or to brevity. One of my chief reasons for dividing morality up into 3 parts, with my picture of the ship sailing in convoy, was that this seemed the shortest way of covering the ground. Here I want to give some idea of another way in which the subject has been divided by old writers, which is too long to use in my talk, but which is a very good one. Excuse me. According to this longer scheme, there are 7 virtues. 4 of them are called cardinal virtues, and the remaining 3 are called theological virtues. That music is not very loud. Wait, can I turn this up? There we go, sorry. Theological virtues are blah, blah, blah. The cardinal ones are those which all civilized people recognize. The theological ones are which, as a rule, only Christians know about. I shall deal with the theological ones later on. At present, I am talking about the 4 cardinal values. The word cardinal has nothing to do with cardinals in the Roman Church. It comes from a Latin word meaning the hinge of a door. These were called cardinal virtues because they are, as we should say, pivotal. Like a door. They are prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. I'm guessing those are the virtues. Prudence means practical common sense, taking the trouble to think out what you are doing and what is likely to come of it. Nowadays, most people hardly think of prudence as one of the virtues. In fact, because Christ said we can only get into his word by being like children, many Christians have the idea that provided you are good, it does not matter being a fool, but as a misunderstanding. In the first place, most Christians show plenty of prudence about doing the things they are really interested in and think them out quite sensibly in the second place. As St. Paul points out, Christ never meant that we were to remain children in intelligence. On the contrary, he told us to be not only as harmless as doves, but also as wise as serpents. He wants a child's heart, but a grown-up's head. He wants us to be simple, single-minded, affectionate, and teachable, as good children are. But he also wants every bit of intelligence we have to be alert as its job. And in first-class fighting trim, the fact that you are given money to a charity does not mean that you need not try to find out whether that charity is a fraud or not. The fact that you are thinking about God is himself, for example, when you are praying, does not mean that you can be content with the same babyish ideas which you had when you were a 5-year-old. It is, of course, quite true that God will not love you any less or have less use for you if you have happened to be born at a very second-rate brain. He has room for people with very little sense, but he wants everyone to use what sense they have. The proper motto is not be good, sweet maid, and let who can be clever, but be good, sweet maid, and don't forget that this involves being as clever as you can. God is no fonder of intellectual slackers than of any other slackers. If you are thinking of becoming a Christian, I warn you, you are embarking on something which is going to take the whole of you, brains and all. But fortunately, it works the other way around. Anyone who is honestly trying to be a Christian will soon find his intelligence being sharpened. One of the reasons why it needs to be so special educated, that's the reasons why it needs no special education to be a Christian, is that Christianity is an education itself. That is why an uneducated believer like Bunyan was able to write a book that astonished the whole world. Temperance is, unfortunately, one of those words that has changed its meaning. It now usually means teetotalism? Is that how you say that? It's this one right here. That's weird. But in the days when the second cardinal virtue was Christ and temperance, it meant nothing of the sort. Temperance referred not specially to drink, but to all pleasures, and it meant not abstaining, but going the right length and no further. It is a mistake to think that Christians ought all to be teetotaler. What is that word? I feel like I'm reading it wrong. Mohammedanism's, not Christianity, is the teetotal religion. I'm sorry for reading it like that. I don't know what that word is. Of course, it may be the duty of a particular Christian or any other Christian at a particular time to abstain from strong drink, either because he is of the sort of man who cannot drink at all without drinking too much, or because he is with people who are inclined to drunkenness and must not encourage them by drinking himself. But the whole point is that he is abstaining for a good reason, from something which he does not condemn and which he likes to see other people enjoying. One of the marks of a certain type of bad man is that he cannot give up a thing himself without wanting everyone else to give up on it too. That is not the Christian way. An individual Christian may see fit to give up all sorts of things for special reasons, marriage or meat or beer or the cinema, but the moment he starts saying that the things are bad in themselves or looking down his nose at other people who do them, he has taken the wrong turning. Okay, I think I kind of get it. It's like saying not to be a hypocrite, at least in this little part. One great piece of mischief has been done by the modern restriction of the word temperance to the question of drink. It helps people to forget that you can just be as intemperate about lots of other things. A man who makes his golf or his motorbike, these old words are really tripping me up, or his motorcycle the center of his life, or a woman who devotes all her thoughts to clothes or bridge of her dog, or is being just as intemperate as someone who gets drunk every evening. I want to say every night, because that just makes more sense. Of course, it does not show on the outside so easily. Bridge mania or golf mania do not make you fall down in the middle of the road, but God is not deceived by externals. Justice means much more than the sort of thing that goes on in law courts. It is the old name for everything we should now call fairness. It includes honesty, give and take, truthfulness and keeping promises, and all that side of life. And fortitude includes both kinds of courage, the kind that faces danger as well as the kind that sticks to it under pain. Guts is perhaps the nearest modern English you will notice. Of course, that you cannot practice any of the other virtues very long without bringing this one into play. There's one further point about the virtues that ought to be noticed. There's a difference between doing some particular just or temperate action and being a just or temperate man. Someone who is not a good tennis player may now and then make a good shot. What you mean by a good player is a man whose eye and muscles and nerves have been so trained by making innumerable good shots that they can now be relied on. They have a certain tone or quality which is there even when he is not playing. Just as a mathematician's mind has a certain habit and outlook which is there even when he is not doing mathematics. In the same way, a man who perseveres in doing just actions gets in the end a certain quality of character. Now it is that quality rather than the particular actions which we mean when we talk of a virtue. This distinction is important for the following reason. If we thought only of the particular action, we might encourage three wrong ideas. 1. We might think that provided you did the right thing, it did not matter how or why you did it. Whether you did it willingly or unwillingly, sulkily or cheerfully, through a fear of public opinion or for its own sake. But the truth is that right actions done for the wrong reason do not help to build the internal quality or character called virtue. And it is this quality or character that really matters. If the bad tennis player hits very hard, not because he sees that a very hard stroke is required, but because he has lost his temper, his stroke might possibly, by luck, help him to win that particular game, but it will not be helping him to become a reliable player. We might think that God wanted simply obedience to a set of rules, whereas he really wants people of a particular sort. That's number 2, sorry. And 3, we might think that the virtues were necessary only for this present life, that in the other world we could stop being just because there's nothing to quarrel about and stop being brave because there is no danger. Now it's quite true that there will probably be no occasion for just or courageous acts in the next world, but there will be very occasion for being the sort of people that we can become only as a result of doing such acts here. The point is not that God will refuse you admission to his eternal world if you have not got certain qualities or character. The point is that if people have not got at least the beginnings of those qualities inside them, then no possible external conditions could make a heaven for them could not make them happy with the deep, strong, unshakable kind of happiness God intends for us. Okay. Carnal virtues. Yeah, that was a bit hard to read, only just because of that really old and particular way of writing in terms of explaining things and going about things. Also, just choice of words. But I think I kind of got it in terms of he's talking about these virtues of particular things, way of looking at things, right? Saying just because the action is correct, at least in this last part, right, doesn't mean the thing behind it was good, right? So you can get lucky, like a tennis player. You can get lucky hitting your shots if you're hitting them out of anger or just getting lucky, period. But it doesn't mean your mind and like reason for being and doing is growing or doing it for the correct reasons. You're just getting lucky, which happens. Yeah, this is a bit confusing. I'm hoping maybe it'll make more sense hopefully with next chapter. And I'm hoping this will be it. Just for this video, of course. Chapter 3, Social Morality. First thing to get clear about Christian morality between man and man is that in this department of Christ did not come to preach any brand new morality. The golden rule of the New Testament, do as you would be done by, is a summing up of what everyone at bottom had always known to be right. Really great moral teachers never do introduce new moralities. It is quacks and cranks who do that. Quacks and... okay. I've never heard that expression. As Dr. Johnson said, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. The real job of every moral teacher is to keep on bringing us back time after time to the old simple principles which we are also anxious not to see. Like bringing a horse back and back to the fence it has refused to jump, or bringing a child back and back to the bit in its lesson that it wants to shirk. Okay. Oh, so I wish these pages were longer. I wish they were like wider, so just to get more words for a fuller sentence. The second thing to get clear is that Christianity has not and does not profess to have a detailed political program for applying. Do as you would be done by to a particular society at a particular moment. It could not have. It is meant for all men at all times, and the particular program which suited one place or time would not suit another. And anyhow, that is not how Christianity works. When it tells you to feed the hungry, it does not give you lessons in cookery. When it tells you to read the scriptures, it does not give you lessons in Hebrew and Greek, or even in English grammar. It was never intended to replace or supersede the ordinary human arts and sciences. It is rather a director which will set them all to the right jobs, and a source of energy which will give them all the new life, if only they will put themselves at its disposal. People say the church ought to give us a lead. That is true if they mean it in the right way, but false if they mean it in the wrong way. By the church, they ought to mean the whole body of practicing Christians, and when they say that the church should give us a lead, they ought to mean that some Christians, those who happen to have the right talents, should be economists and statesmen, and that all economists and statesmen should be Christians, and that their whole efforts in politics and economics should be directed to putting do as you would be done by into action. Do as you would be done to. That's just right. Treat others as you want to be treated, right? That's basically what this means. I'm not sure. I think it is, though. Into action. If that happened, and if we others were really ready to take it, then we should find the Christian solution for our own social problems pretty quickly. But of course, when they ask for a lead from the church, most people mean they want the clergy to put out a political program. That's silly. Tell me about it. The clergy are those particular people within the whole church who have been specially trained and set aside to look after what concerns us as creatures who are going to live forever. We were asking them to do a quite different job for which they had not been trained. The job is really on us and on the layman. The application of Christian principles, say to train unicism or education, must come from Christian trade unicists and Christian schoolmasters, just as Christian literature comes from Christian novelists and dramatists. At least old words for things always trip me up. It's like, why? Who said that? Not from the bench of bishops getting together and trying to write plays and novels in their spare time. All the same, the New Testament, without going into detail, gives us a pretty clear hint of what a fully Christian society would be like. Perhaps it gives us more than we can take. It tells us that there are to be no passengers or parasites. If man does not work, he ought not to eat. Everyone is to work with his own hands, and what is more, everyone's work is to produce something good. There will be no manufacture of silly luxuries, and then of sillier advertisements to persuade us to buy them. And there is to be no swank or side, no putting on airs. To that extent, a Christian society would be what we now call leftists. Oh, I hate leftists. That's me. On the other hand, it is always insisting on obedience and outward marks of respect from all of us to properly appointed magistrates, from children to parents, and I'm afraid this is going to be very unpopular, from wives to husbands. I mean, I guess it's because he's explaining the basic hierarchy. Like, that shouldn't be upsetting. Jesus said that, man. Thirdly, it is to be a cheerful society, full of singing and rejoicing, and regarding worry or anxiety as wrong. Courtesy is one of the Christian virtues, and the New Testament hates what it calls busybodies. That's true. If there were such a society in existence, and you or I visit it, I think we should come away with a curious impression. We should feel that its economic life was very socialistic and in that sense advanced, but that its family life and its code of manners were rather old-fashioned, perhaps even ceremonious and aristocratic. Each of us would like some bits of it, but I'm afraid very few of us would like the whole thing. That is just the way one would expect if Christianity is the total plan for the human machine. We have all departed from the total plan in different ways, and each of us wants to make out that his own modification of the original plan is the plan itself. You will find this again and again about anything that is really Christian. Everyone is attracted by bits of it and wants to pick out those bits and leave the rest. That is why we do not get much further, and that is why people who are fighting for quite opposite things can both say they are fighting for Christianity. Okay, so you're kind of talking about like the different sects and people wanting it for just for themselves, and they like, oh, I like this part of Christianity, but not the rest. Classic people, you know what I'm saying? Now another point. There is one bit of advice given to us by the ancient heathens Greeks and by the ancient heathen Greeks and by the Jews in the Old Testament and by the great Christian teachers of the Middle Ages, which the modern economic system has completely disobeyed. All these people told us not to lend money at interest, and lending money at interest, what we call investment, is the basis of our whole system. Now, it may not absolutely follow that we are wrong. Some people say that when Moses and Aristotle and the Christians agreed in forbidding interest, or usury as they called it, they could not foresee the joint stock company and were only thinking of the private money lender, and that therefore we need not bother about what they said. That is a question I cannot decide on. I am not an economist, and I simply do not know whether the investment system is responsible for the state we are in or not. This is where we want the Christian economists, but I should not have been honest if I had not told you that there are three great civilizations that agreed, or so it seems at first sight, in condemning the very thing in which we have based our whole life. What are you talking about, bro? I don't understand this last part. One more point, and I am done. In the passage where the New Testament says that everyone must work, it gives us a reason in order that he may have something to give to those in need. Charity, given to the poor, is an essential part of the Christian morality, and the frightening parable of the sheep and the goats seems to be the point on which everything turns. Some people nowadays say that charity ought to be unnecessary, and that instead of giving to the poor, we ought to be producing a society in which there will be no poor to give to. They may be quite right in saying that we ought to produce this kind of society, but if anyone thinks that as a consequence you can stop giving in the meantime, then he has part company with all Christian morality. And he has parted, sorry. I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, our expenditure on comfort, luxuries, amusements, etc. is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own. We are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say that they are too small. There ought to be things we should do that we should like to do and cannot do because our charities expenditure excludes them. I'm speaking now of charities in the common way, particular cases of distress among your own relatives, friends and neighbors, or employees which God, as it were, forces upon your notice, may demand much more into the crippling and endangering of your own position. For many of us, the great obstacle to charity lies not in the luxurious living or desire for more money, but in our fear. Fear of insecurity. This must often be recognized as a temptation. Sometimes our pride also hinders our charity. We are tempted to spend more than we ought on the showy forms of generosity, tipping hospitality and less than we ought to those who really need our help. And now before I end, I'm going to venture on a guess as to how this section was affected by any who have read it. My guess is that there are some leftist people among you who are very angry that it has not gone further in that direction, and some people of an opposite sort who are angry because they think it has gone much too far. If so, that brings us right up against the real snag in all this drawing up of blueprints for a Christian society. Most of us are not really approaching the subject in order to find out what Christianity says. We are approaching it in the hope of finding support from Christianity for the views of our own party. Shocker. We are looking for an ally where we were offered either a master or a judge. I am just the same. There are bits in this section that I wanted to leave out, and that is why nothing whatever is going to come on such talks unless we go a much longer way around. A Christian society is not going to arrive until most of us really want it, and we are not going to want it till we become fully Christian. I may repeat, do as you would be done by. Till I am black in the face, I cannot really carry it out till I love my neighbor as myself, and I cannot learn to love my neighbor as myself till I learn to love God. And I cannot learn to love God except by learning to obey him. And so, as I warned you, we are driven on something more inward, driven on from social matters to religious matters, for the longest way round is the shortest way home. That was really good. Okay, I don't know if it's just the subject matter, because I think also these last few chapters last time were also complicated. Page 88, by the way. But I think now he's getting into actual more like ethics and morals, right? If you can tell, in terms of saying, look, here's the basic Christian thing, right? Of giving to the poor, right? And if you don't work, you don't eat. Love those super good ethics. And I love how in the beginning he's like, it's kind of just that exactly. It's very basic and simple, not to overcomplicate it. But now when he gets into the part of actually putting it in practice and overcomplicating it, it becomes a lot, it's still simple, I think, but becomes a lot more political and systematic in terms of, okay, he's telling us, and I agree, right, to give and basically until you can't give no more, practically, in terms of giving to the poor. That makes sense. But also to not do it, say, extremely, because you do have to still, say, live, eat, pay for family, all these other things. And I think he's saying that there, also bringing it up as one, because I think people just in general kind of approach it from, oh yeah, I can spare this. Yeah, I can give that. Yeah, I don't really mind. You know, if you don't mind, it doesn't like affect you or bother you in some way, it doesn't really count. It's kind of like apologizing. If you don't mean it or remember what you're apologizing for, then you aren't really apologizing, and therefore kind of don't mean anything by it. That's kind of the read I get from it. Like I said, this gets a little hazy, and I think I read it kind of bad for a lot of it, but just the format of how the book is here as well. But that's kind of it. Again, this is gonna be a shorter episode. I'll probably stream this again soon, probably before or after some playing during this week. I want to do more, obviously. I love doing it once a week. Thank you all for hanging out, listening to me. Hopefully my voice doesn't sound that bad and that the reading wasn't that awful. Hopefully I get better as we go along and read more books and finish this one. But please leave a like, comment, and God bless y'all. Bye.